Hello and welcome to this, my very first YouTube video in which I refuse to pay upwards of $1,000 on a new kitchen island and instead lose roughly the same amount of money through opportunity cost as I spend several consecutive weekends upcycling this $40 Craigslist treasure. As you can see, it is missing a top, but is otherwise in decent shape. It has these doors in the back as well as in the front, and the whole unit is on wheels, which will make it a nice mobile addition to our new kitchen in the house we just bought, which is sorely lacking counter space for prepping food. There was a good amount of unidentifiable scuzziness on the surface of the cabinets, which I was secretly really looking forward to removing because I felt like it was going to be very satisfying. And although I normally do like white furniture and white cabinets in kitchens, this piece is not destined to remain white. I'm envisioning something more dramatic for this transformation. First up, I'm removing the plastic wrapping and opening up the doors to see how the drawers slide and see what I'm working with here. There were these cork drawer liners that I will definitely not be reusing, and I also found 11 cents, making a return on this investment already. I initially thought that top left drawer was broken, but it wasn't. It was just out of its track. So now I get to start my prep work. I'm giving the face of the cabinets a liberal spritzing with this cleaning product called Crud Cutter, which is good for sticky kitchen messes. And I will be linking every product I use in this video in the description box in case you are interested in trying anything out yourself. The Crud Cutter did a pretty good job, and I will also be sanding this piece later, so that will take off surface grime as well. I just wanted to get the worst of the gunk off initially. Now I'm using my vacuum to suck up all the dirt and crumbs inside the drawers, and then kind of on a whim I decided I wanted to really disinfect this island before I started working on it, so I busted out the bleach and mixed some of that into a trash can full of water because we just moved and I don't know where any of our buckets are. This just seemed like a good idea in the time of Corona, like bleach every new purchase you make, bleach your food before you eat it per CDC guidelines, you can never be too safe. Now, there were some structural issues that I had to address at the outset, including the fact that a couple of the edges were loose here where the back and the sides joined. This corner brace was also quite loose, and there was only one of them. The other three were missing, so I just removed it. I'll address that later. Now I'm going in with some wood glue. This is Titebond 2, which worked very well. And I'm wearing a glove because I hate the feeling of glue on my hands, so I'm just spreading that around with my glove and trying to get as much of it into the cracks as possible. To clamp up this project while it dried, I went out and bought this contraption, which has 4 right angle plastic pieces that you line up with the corners of your project and then pull the nylon tape taut, and that allows you to clamp large projects more easily. So yeah, super simple, just finesse that perfectly into place, and yeah. So this was really difficult to do alone. I would recommend enlisting the help of a second person, which I did not due to pride. So it fell off like that again 3 more times, and then finally I got it fastened down, and I was pretty happy with how tightly it held that back corner, which had the bigger gap. Turning my attention to the top 2 drawers, both of them needed a glue up as well, so I'm using more Titebond 2 to bring those edges together, and then these will be clamped up with regular clamps and left to dry for a couple of hours. While those were drying, I decided to sand out these divots on the base of the island. So I'm using some 80 grit sandpaper and the sanding attachment on my multi-tool to even out this surface. I got a little carried away with the sanding down here because the wood just turned out to be pine and was really easy to sand. But the goal was just to get a smooth surface for repainting. So I did one side and then the other, and then that was good enough. Now, unclamping the drawers, the glue had done a good job. Everything felt much more sturdy. It was time to disassemble. I am a big believer in taking off hardware before doing any painting. It's a major pet peeve of mine when people paint over hardware. And in this case, I'll be replacing it anyway, so it did have to come off. This was harder than it looked. It took a good amount of elbow grease. This step was of dubious utility, but I decided to go ahead and remove the drawer slides now because I wanted to realign them when the drawers went back in to ensure that they would be perfectly straight and flush to the front face cabinets. And I'm also removing the doors on the back. These knobs will not be staying, so I have to remove them, but as you can see, someone has committed the cardinal sin of painting over the screws. And the only thing you can do in this situation is gouge out enough of that paint to be able to get a grip on the head of the screw. So that's what I'm doing carefully with the box cutter. And now I can use a screwdriver to twist out the screws. I also have to take off these little fuzzy guys on the backs of the doors before I can sand and paint. So I'm using just a small handsaw to do that. On to the sanding. This was the step that took the longest. It was literal hours. I edited the footage down considerably, you're welcome, but trust me when I say that empires rose and fell in the time it took me to sand every component of this island. Like, Pangea broke apart and formed the 7 continents, and I was still sanding. The time it took me to sand this was comparable to the lifespan of the musical Cats, which enjoyed 18 successive years on Broadway before being inexplicably reworked in a very upsetting 2019 feature-length film adaptation that was, in retrospect, a prelude to the impending nightmarish reality of 2020 generally. And that is what I was thinking about in the time that I spent sanding. But finally it was done, and I was almost ready to start painting. First, I had to vacuum up the dust and wipe the whole unit down, and now I'm using some wood putty to fill in the holes on the fronts of the doors because my new hardware will be installed in a different location and these areas will need to be smooth. I like this type because it goes on pink and dries beige when it's ready to be sanded, and it doesn't take very long overall to dry. Finally, it's time for the new paint color, and after much deliberation, I decided to go with this dark green called Castle Stone by PPG. I had been seeing a lot of green kitchen inspo on Pinterest, and I thought it looked really cool, especially with these like gold or brass accents. So that was the kind of the vibe I was trying to emulate. I knew that I wanted a butcher block top and a dark stain, and I thought that that would look good, especially with the green also. I'm going to start by decanting some of this paint into a smaller vessel, a leftover Halloween party cup. And if you just give it a really graceful little flick of the wrist here at the end, you can spill paint everywhere. Christ. Okay. I am adding some water, which is expressly against the manufacturer's instruction on the can, so proceed at your own risk, but thinning out paint when you're using a brush can reduce like visible brush strokes, and I was trying to go for a more polished finish. So with that thinner consistency, you'll probably have to apply more coats overall, but it'll hopefully look a little closer to an airbrushed finish. You can see I didn't prime this island before applying my first coat because on previously painted furniture, the old paint kind of serves as a primer layer. It wouldn't be wrong to apply primer anyway though, and if I were to do this again, I think I probably would, just because it did take several coats of my thin paint to get adequate coverage. The first color coat goes on streaky no matter what, but the sanding from the previous stuff has scuffed up the surface and gives that paint something to stick to. So I'm just going around and getting my base coat on every surface here. It was around this point in the project that my husband Chris wandered in, and I asked him what he thought of the color, and he diplomatically said that it looked good despite the fact that he, quote, has never much cared for green in kitchens. So, okay. Admittedly, I did not ask for his input before choosing a color, but because of this, I decided to simplify the project a bit by intentionally not doing a protective top coat over this paint in the end, because I might just end up redoing it at some point with a new mutually agreeable color, so it'll be okay if it gets a little dinged up between now and then. I also turned our dining room table into an extension of the painting workshop and let everything dry with its first coat. A few hours later, it was time to go in with the second coat, and this layer feels much more satisfying. It fills in all the holidays in the paint from the first coat and begins to look more finished. I bought a small can of black paint as well. This is Limousine Leather by Behr, and I'm using it to repaint the toe kick. I considered sanding off all the original black paint and just staining the wood on the toe kick, but decided against it because A, it was too much extra work, and B, I was worried it wouldn't match the butcher block top that I was planning because they were two different species of wood and might stain differently and look weird, so black it is. Okay, I'm about to line the drawers, but first, I would like to say that I feel like this self-adhesive paper played me. Look at the Amazon listing and tell me what color the background looks like to you. Doesn't it look decidedly white or perhaps like faintly cream in some of these product pictures? It definitely doesn't look like the true color, which was this pukey, olivey beige, which matched the floor pretty well, which was not redeeming because I hate these floors. I don't even want to admit how long I spent browsing Amazon for drawer liner paper, so I was pretty annoyed by this, but not enough to return it. But I also found this product pretty difficult to work with, and I have installed drawer liner paper before, but the adhesive on this one was very strong. It made it difficult to manipulate, and the listing specifically claimed that this paper was repositionable. By who? Zeus? So I'm not going to show you all the footage of me attempting to place this and getting it slightly wrong and like moving it around, but it worked well enough in the end and was better than having naked drawers. Okay, I've got my stack of 4 doors here and I'm examining them to determine which 2 look the best because I'll put those in the front of the cabinet and the 2 less polished looking ones can go on the back. So with those selections made, it is time to put on the new hardware, which were these gold colored hinges from Amazon. Luckily, these were the exact same size and shape as the silver ones that I had removed before, so I was able to use the existing holes and just screw the new hardware into place on all 4 doors and then line them up with the face of the cabinet and put them back on. This is a packet of corner braces, which I'll use to attach the butcher block countertop. Begin by taking a screw that is slightly too long and then just try your best to stop shy of going all the way through the wood. Yep, okay. Well, that's what happens when you're too lazy to go back to Home Depot for the 47th time to buy slightly smaller screws. So I just reversed them back out a tad. It was fine. This area will be partially covered by the countertop overhang anyway, so there's all 4 of them in place. I love these brushed gold knobs from Amazon. They came with these 2 sizes for the threaded back, so whichever one works for your drawer, you can just push it through the hole with the help of a screwdriver and then twist the knob tightly into place. Repeat on all drawers. Now I'm reattaching the drawer slides by securing the front screw and then inserting the drawer, lining it up flush with the cabinet, and then wherever that end of the drawer slide hits at the back is where I will screw it down. I did end up adding paper to the sides of the drawers as well to make them look more finished, so this is how they looked in the end. I wanted the door hardware to be higher up than it was before, since this is a more natural height to be opening the door from when you're standing up. So I made this little cardboard template to mark where to drill my pilot holes, flipped it over, made sure I got a symmetrical result on the other side. The type of pulls that I got for these drawers sit inside the wood from the front, so I was confused until I realized that I had to enlarge the holes enough to get those into place securely and put on this little backer plate, and then the threaded pin goes in to hold it from the back. I loved the look of these pulls. They matched the knobs perfectly. They felt heavy. They were good quality. Link is in the description, like I said, for all of these products. I had decided to add a towel bar as well on the side, and I'm so happy I did. I think this was my favorite element of the redesign. That gold bar just pops so well against the dark green. I love it. On to the butcher block. This was a birch countertop from Home Depot, which came in this size. I didn't even have to cut it, but I knew that I wanted to stain it, and birch is notorious for not staining well. It can be very blotchy. So the recommendation is to first apply some wood conditioner and then test out your stain. So I had two colors from Varathane to try out, this darker one in Kona and a lighter one in Honey. I was very graceful in opening the can, and then I used an old clean gym sock to spread some of each stain onto the area with the conditioner to see which one I liked better. And in the end, I decided I wanted to mix the two to get kind of a custom middle shade, so I am glad I tested first. That test surface will be the underside of the counter, so I'm flipping it over and will now thoroughly sand the top with 3 grits of sandpaper, starting with 120, then 150, then 220 to finish. Make sure to get rid of the dust between each step so you don't grind it back into your work surface, and then just use a tack cloth to wipe up the last remnants of dust before you apply any liquids. Wood conditioner now going onto the entire top and sides, everywhere where the stain will go. This is by Varathane as well, and I was very impressed by it. It did help the stain go on much more evenly. This had to dry for about a half hour before applying the stain, which, as I mentioned, was a custom creation, and it worked out very well. I just mixed them together into another Halloween party cup, rubbed it over the wood. It gave this really nice, rich, warm tone look that was exactly what I was hoping for. A note on stain. Most stains are not considered food grade, but pretty much all stains are food safe if you allow them to fully cure for the amount of time listed on the can. We won't be cutting on this surface or disrupting it in any way, so I felt fine about using stain, especially since I'll be sealing it with beeswax, which is food safe, so that's like another barrier on top. But I wouldn't recommend like gnawing on your stained countertops. That is probably a health risk. Now I'm measuring the overhang on all sides to ensure that it's even, and then putting some clamps on to help hold this in place while I screw it at all 4 corners. This should be secure without being overly tight because wood countertops do need some space to expand and contract, and if you're too aggressive in bolting them down, they can warp over time. Final step is the beeswax. I'm using this handy little doodad to buff in my first application, and then that has to dry for an hour before you can come back in to buff a little more, polish off the excess with a clean cotton cloth, and then let it fully dry until it's no longer tacky, and that's it. Remember how this island looked in the beginning? Dirty, dingy, missing a top, and now it may be green, but even Chris was pretty happy with this result. And now we have a lot more space to store our collection of kitchen items. This was a long project, but I am thrilled with how it turned out. I think the gold accents in particular look so good, and the wood top. It makes me happy every time I walk into the kitchen. We do plan to fully redo this kitchen at some point, but for now the island makes it a little prettier, more functional, so I'm happy. I have got lots more projects in the works, so make sure to like this video and subscribe if you want to see more DIYs, organization, cleaning videos. I will be posting many more, and I hope to see you back here. Thanks for watching.